The views and opinions expressed by Craig's Terrible Idea podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Any content provided by the authors and their guests are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. No animals were harmed in the creation of the podcast, as far as we know.
All right, welcome back. Second part, during our brief interlude.
Second verse, same as first.
Second verse, same as the first. Anywho, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, autonomous zones. So I know we had a interesting text about autonomous zones, and how
I was in the shower when you guys were going back and forth, so I missed most of it.
Well,
go ahead.
So the article that you put, which was that Yahoo News article, it in the headline, it talked about how defund the police is failing in where? Minneapolis it was?
Minneapolis, yeah. They set up an autonomous zone in Minneapolis.
Right. So then I opened the article, and what they're discussing is, like I said, the headline talked about the failure of defund the police. And the article, when it's just talking about an autonomous zone, which it's like, okay, yeah, if you defund the police all the way.
Also, Minneapolis defunded the police. The city council defunded them.
But the article was talking about the autonomous zone. Okay, so my thing is that these autonomous zones, which, like you said, are essentially an attempt at some form of an anarchist society, are something different than what the thrust of defund the police should be right now. Like defund the police, to what I want it to be, has to do with taking money from police departments and moving it towards services that will alleviate the necessity for the police department's presence, in these things, whether it be drugs, whether it be marriage, conflict, resolution, whatever it is, mental health stuff. Move the money from the cops because they don't know how to deal with this shit. They just forced to, you know what I mean? And put money towards more counselors, whatever these services are that are necessary. Whereas an autonomous zone is just cops aren't allowed in there and we're going to run our own shit. And in my opinion, I don't think an anarchist society is something worth even contemplating until you have a populace that is kind of at least on board with socialism, which we don't. So like any current attempt at an anarchist, collective, larger than like just some, group of like-minded people, like any collective smack dab in the middle of the city is doomed to fail and doomed to be an optics nightmare for those of us that are fighting for a reasonable defunding of police.
So they're giving these people an opportunity to run an autonomous zone, right? And they're going to do it without the help of the police or any of the other, emergency services, because they're not going to be covered.
By definition, yeah.
By definition. And basically, they're going to take care of themselves, correct? Which is what they tried to do in Portland, if I remember correctly.
Right. Which was also an optics nightmare.
Right. So, but the same problems happened in there as they happened out in the real world. There were still people walking around with guns, because I think in Portland, Oregon, you have an open carry. You can openly carry your gun, which is what people did. There was, I think, a shooting that happened in Portland where somebody got killed.
Yeah, and I'd like to have cops there to deal with that.
Right, but the thing was that there were no cops at the time for them. Just hear me out. So basically what happened in there and what happened out in the real world, basically the same thing, except the cops weren't involved. So basically they were able to function normally without police intervention. I mean, they had, their own thing. They had their own research and uptick in crime. But my question is, were they able to handle that? Were they able to handle like, little misdemeanor things like, shoplifting, theft?
I mean, so what? Did they have their own court system? Like, did
not
they have
court system,
jails?
But
where does this go? I mean, because then what's the difference, really?
Were they able to, like you said, were they able to function together as a group, knowing that there were certain thresholds they shouldn't cross if they were to remain that way without having a forced intervention like through a police agency.
Well,
Because
any whatever autonomous zone community, whatever, is going to have some agreed upon rules and some agreed upon level of enforcement.
okay, is that anarchy then? I don't
Is
think
what
that-
anarchy?
Would that be considered anarchy?
Well, no, anarchy.
I mean, I guess it
think
depends
would
on how
be-
they set it up inside.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think anarchy would be absolutely no rules,
Right.
but anarchy doesn't. I mean,
Well, all right. All right. So this is why I started to feel like we need to talk about definitions, or at least our working definitions. So,
Right.
like, I think the principles of anarchy are the flattening of unnecessary hierarchy,
okay,
right? So, I mean, again, based on our level of societal evolution, which each of us is taught by, and it's what we are, even as individuals. I don't think we're prepared to remove all hierarchy, you know what I mean, and have a working society. You know what I mean? Like yes, I think I like the ideals of that, but I don't think we're anywhere close to the right mindset. Or like again, this is actually I happen to be wearing a shirt right now, but like one of my boys from YouTube that I really enjoy, he talks about he's pulled back from it now, but he has called himself an anarchist because he does believe that that's an ideal we should shoot for. But the thing is in order to get there, you kind of have to go through like socialism, something after capitalism, and then kind of see what the world looks like from there. You can't just jump to anarchy. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work.
I also, I mean, as you know, I also my problem with pure anarchy or pure socialism, any of that, is I think it doesn't take human nature into account. Is that there's going to be some people in any society who are just, everyone's a mix of good and bad, except maybe Jimmy Carter, who, as far as I can tell, is all good.
Right.
But there's going to be some people who are more selfish,
Now,
who are more prone to taking advantage of others, all that stuff. And any system's got to account for a method of control for that.
right. Now, I absolutely agree with you. I guess my mitigation of that to a certain extent would be that as our society starts moving in this more egalitarian, less hierarchy, society, towards these things, I think people would start behaving differently, and we would learn what societal controls would be necessary for those, hopefully less and less people that do lean that way. But yeah, I mean, yeah, human nature is what it is. I don't know. I mean, yeah,
I think you have more faith in human nature than I do, honestly.
I think I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I know there's bad guys.
I think, first of all, you can apply pure communism to, say, an ant colony, because obviously there are no human emotions involved. What it comes down to is there will always be a hierarchy one way or another, because if you look at certain animal hierarchies, like wolves, for example, what they will do is once the kill is complete, they'll allow the alpha male and the alpha female to eat, and then everybody has a pecking order to go until you reach the weakest member of the pack, who will eat last.
Now, again, this is an example of what I would call an unjust hierarchy. I believe that we need hierarchy, but I would like to diffuse it and make it as egalitarian as possible. So
I agree with you.
All right, and that would be a perfect utopia, but you're talking about human nature here. And
well, I mean, I'm not actually talking utopian. I'm talking about ideal. So I would want my society to constantly be pushing in that direction. Right. So that's the idea of democracy versus what we had before. And the idea of making sure that everybody gets a vote and everybody's vote is equal.
Mhm.
That's more egalitarian. That's more diffused in terms of who has the power, because it's spread more flatly and widely and broadly.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that. And so it's not utopian. It's an ideal.
It's an ideal, and I'm all for it. I know you guys are all for it. Every rational person out there is for it. But how do you convince, all the GOP politicians in Georgia? How do you convince
Well, I
them?
mean, again, it's step by step. So we seem to convince a lot of the American people after the stuff that we passed after the Depression. You know what I mean? Like, so we got a lot more people more on board with, you know, programs that kind of have their roots or some kind of basis in socialism, you know, like so he didn't do Social Security, but like all of those things that have made our lives so much better, you know, that are universal programs to kind of lift all of us up to a more level playing field. And I know Black people weren't included, gay people, whatever. There was all kinds of people omitted from that. But so you start with, like, again, Bernie was running on Medicare for all. It's like, oh yeah, we all want Medicare. Like, it's kind of, but it's also like, you know, we're slipping us a pill. It's like, okay, if we accept that, then, you know, if we can get the population to take that, then we can use that as an argument for the next one.
If
like, look how good this is, and how, well, but I mean, I would imagine, like, you look at every country that has nationalized healthcare, and they wouldn't give it up for anything.
I mean, you're basically waiting for Biden's New Deal, right? Biden's New Deal 2.0, and, you know, hopefully it'll bring everybody on board, fix the infrastructure, create jobs, provide better social net, emergency nets for people who don't have it. I mean, these are all great things. Now you're going up against the GOP political machine, who is 100% capitalist. They believe strength rules all. You know, might is right. And
I don't even think they're 100% capitalist. I think they are 100% keeping whatever structures in place which have let white people be in charge.
Yeah. So what would you label that then? How would you label?
I don't know how I would label it. I can know how I would describe it, which is from the start of the country up until very recently, white men have always been in charge of everything. And it's really, I mean, like, when did we get our first non-white president? Recently.
I mean, we can actually restrict that further, because it was white landowning men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
when did we get our first female vice president? A couple months ago.
So these things,
yeah, but I think it's about keeping the structures, which include structural racism, in place. That's what they're for. And there was an article I read last week. It was a survey of Republican voters. And one of the things it found was, if you poll Trump voters, or if you ask Trump voters about, and if you want to, I can dig it up. We can put it in the notes later if you want.
Sure.
If you ask Trump voters sort of like, you know, direction of the country, what they're worried about, a significant chunk of them are essentially worried about that the country will change so that white people no longer automatically get a leg up. Like, that's the concern, you know, and it's dressed up, and because, you know, they're not interested in capitalism. They're not interested in the free market. They're interested in the rigged market, whatever benefits them.
Or takes away from their perceived rights. That's
exactly.
That's their biggest
their
thing.
Actual power. Because, like, look at all the anti-voting laws they're passing. Look, Delta helped write the voter law and the anti-voter law in Georgia. You know, Delta is, I think, the largest airline in the world. So we know where their chips are going. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But all this happened through history as more and more people, started banding together collectively and started making their voices heard. Suffrage didn't start until, what was it, the 1880s? And it happened in England.
Seneca Conference was 1842, 1847, like that.
And, you know, eventually women got the right to vote, and then they got the right to hold office. And same thing goes for, you know, people of color, right? Like, when were free Black men allowed to vote? I think they were allowed to vote, right?
I think immediately, right?
Immediately, as long as you have land, right? As long as you.
I don't
think that was gone by that point, I think.
Yeah, but of course, then you immediately get not immediately, but very quickly you get Jim Crow.
Jim Crow, because, you know, the South said that we will go along with your Reconstruction laws if you give us this, right? Which Grant basically said, sure thing, no problem, because, you know, he wanted to unify the country as quickly as possible, so he gave it to them.
It's more, I mean, it's more complicated than that. It was a decades-long process,
right?
But yeah, basically the North gave up.
Right.
Well, like, so I forget exactly what it was, but I read something, like, when we were talking a little while ago about, you know, the whole tactic that the plantation owners had, where they realized they were losing the poor whites, rural whites, who were voting with the now majority blacks, Republican blacks. Who were taxing and adding all these services and all this stuff, and the poor whites were going along with them. And so the tactic was to convince them that it's like, oh, this is way too much taxes. This is a burden on you. And wait, shit, I lost my
Well, it's basically saying that the newly freed black people, newly freed slaves were taking their jobs. They're being able to hold land that should have normally gone to poor white people.
Oh,
right.
I found it again. Hold on.
Okay,
so part of why the North, at least in this article that I read, didn't fight harder for the Southern blacks was because they had their own problems with poor whites up here that they didn't want to band together with the blacks of the South again. You know what I mean? And take power away from the powerful.
I can see that totally.
That's why that was this article's argument for why the North didn't push harder for the changes that it needed down there.
And it still took like 120 years for things. Actually, take that back. It took about 100 years because Martin Luther King and the Cultural Revolution started happening in like the early 60s, correct?
Well, no, the Civil Rights Movement started in the 50s.
Yeah, culminated in the 60s.
All right, say around, all right, so about 90 to 100 years before it actually really gained steam, right? And then all of a sudden, you had desegregation of schools, you had equal pay for everybody, you had equal opportunity laws passed, et cetera, et cetera. So it took about 100 years, 2 generations more or less, to get to where we are now.
And Nixon, by the way, really used desegregation of schools as a wedge issue.
Right.
Like he was very effective in that.
So my question is, you still have a very powerful bloc of politicians that don't want to give up power. Do you think they'll be able to convince their voters to go along with it? Because I think there's been articles in Atlantic and The Guardian where they might have misjudged about setting down. To me, those are draconian voting laws, right? That you can't hand anybody a bottle of water while they're waiting in line to vote.
I don't think, I personally don't think the question is, can they get their voters to go along with it? I think the question is let's talk about Georgia specifically. Given the rapidly changing demographics in Georgia, can they suppress enough votes to win elections? I think is their question. So I don't, right. I think that a significant chunk of their voters will go along with it because a significant chunk of their voters are, whether they know it or not, want structural racism because they benefit from it.
Right.
It's like, this quote has been going around, for years now. It's not original, but it basically says that, if you are, and I think we said it last time, if you're used to privilege, then equality feels like you're losing something.
Right.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is like if you listen to the way they talk about the changes, they don't talk about being afraid of equality. They talk about like, we're going to be on the bottom. We're persecuted more than anybody else. And I think a lot of the people actually think that. I don't know what's in their hearts. I mean, who can? But and so in that context, if you really feel that way, I understand fighting for it.
Well, look at all the people that are saying that wear a mask. Oh, it's my constitutional right not to wear a mask. All my rights are being oppressed, right? That's what they're fighting about. They're fighting about my individual freedoms, my individual freedom to buy any gun that I want, my individual freedom, not to wear a mask in public because I don't believe in these laws. I have a health condition. It's just all these they're not about helping society in general. They're more about helping
individualistic.
They're about only themselves, right? So it's privilege versus what do you call it when you're like Japan? You're more responsible to society, to their society as a whole, to the group, as opposed to the individual, right?
Well, I also think that there is a significant population of people out there, mainly white people, who have really never been told no in their lives. And by that I mean look, me, like I've never been followed around a store by store security because of the color of my skin. I've never been arrested for driving while black. In interactions with the cops, I'm not worried they're going to shoot
driving
me.
while white.
Yeah, no, I've been pulled over for driving by white, but in their defense, I was doing like 95, so they had to set it
Right,
right.
yeah.
Well,
Connecticut State Troopers.
Yeah, and the same thing is
right.
like I've been following around stores and I've been pulled over, but usually I was being a scumbag.
Yeah, no, Connecticut State Troopers are no fucking joke. That's all I'll say.
Hey,
Um,
Georgia State Troopers, no fucking joke.
Yeah.
Florida State Troopers,
but
no joke.
like if you're, if you have benefited from the advantages that white privilege is giving you all your life,
Mhm.
As far as you're concerned, that's the normal order. So, like I said, so if you apply for the job and the Latino woman gets in ahead of you,
Mhm.
or like the African American dude gets it, or the Asian guy, or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, I think there's an instinct that says, well, that's affirmative action. It's like, no, maybe the Latino dude's better at the job than you are.
Right.
But like,
I mean,
because you're used to that, I
Right.
always come first.
I mean, it's also interesting to I feel like you can see this a little bit in that, I forget what they called the scandal, but with those white families that were lying on things on the college applications,
Oh,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing.
Right.
It's like you can probably find plenty of people that would be totally down with defund the police and Black Lives Matter and all that stuff, you know what I mean, and yet still do this
Yeah.
in their own personal life. You know what I mean? Like still making those cloistered privileged choices for their own personal life. And I mean, I think everybody can be guilty of that. I think it's again a human nature thing. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I learned, like doing all the canvassing and all the door knocking and the phone calling that I've done, is that, like I grew up with this hyper political family, blah, 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 whatever. But most people have like a really sort of like a narrow view of stuff that they worry about and keep track of, like family, job, sports, hobbies, whatever. It's like, so like I say this to some of my volunteers now. It's like our job is to go talk to low information voters, and low information voter is not a pejorative term. It's just the fact that like if you stop someone, like they're probably going to be much more interested in March Madness or whatever than they are in policy, and that's just how it is.
Right.
So yeah, I think most people do have they live in a relatively narrow bubble, and as far as those those needs are met, they don't sort of worry about the other stuff. It's like they might bitch about their taxes, but they're much more likely. I can't tell you how many doors we knocked on, and they're like, what's going on is they're all watching football.
All right.
Yeah, it's kind of reminds me, like I had a conversation with one of my like childhood friends. It was all through text, so it wasn't like that much of a conversation. But basically what he had said something where it was just like, I don't pay attention to any of this fucking quarantine shit. So I think it's all bullshit or whatever. And and so I just had to kind of put out there, just just say my piece, just like, well, I mean, it seems like I know too many nurses, and I hear too many doctors, and I kind of believe in the way we do science, you know what I mean? Like, and so if they're saying all this stuff, I feel like there's got to be a certain amount of reality to it.
Yeah.
And he said like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I do the stuff, you know what I mean? Like, but and so we eventually got to a point where it's just like, the reason I brought this up was because like, I he said like, oh, I'd like, because I had said like, it's like, yeah, this has become like a partisan political thing. And he's like, oh, well, I don't pay attention to politics at all. Just like, yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's like this is like a heated political discussion, and he has taken his stand on one side. It's like he feels the way he does about it, and yet he doesn't pay attention to politics.
Denial when he's in the face of pure facts, and that's basically been my argument.
I mean, but I mean, I gotta say, like, all right, so I have trust in the institutions that we build our science off of, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm not learned enough to interpret this stuff myself.
Right.
I have to have it interpreted for me, right?
Right.
But I trust it, so it kind of works.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
trust it because experts, they're the ones who did the research. They're the ones who did the data finding.
I think this is we lost Don. I think that's the disconnect is where does that trust come from, and why does it seem like half of our population doesn't have it?
Right.
He
lost his connection, so
Yeah,
hopefully
he sure
will come
did.
back. So I'm gonna wait till he comes back because we got to get to our. We'll end it with my terrible idea and how I think how we can like even the playing field. If I can.
All right.
So let's see. I'm going to try and add Don back in. If I only knew how. Here we go.
I think he has to sign to log in
All
first.
right, hold on. So I gotta copy invitation. So get a copy invite link.
Oh, is it out?
His internet went out. Well, if his internet, oh, he probably is on his phone. God damn it.
Yeah.
This sucks. Let me try and.
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? So I'll lay it out there. My terrible idea. I know Don would have a field day with it. So my terrible idea to like even the playing field is to reinstitute mandatory 2-year military service. Okay, so hear me out. So there's a book out there by one of my favorite authors, Robert Heinlein, Starship Troopers, and basically the entire premise, he was basically pro-war. It was written during the Korean War. He was pissed that, you know, all these nuclear regulations were being thrown about, you know, and he was very fearful of the communist takeover of the world. So he wanted to put a story out there. Basically what he says is government is ruled by people who have sacrificed their time in federal service. And federal service doesn't just necessarily mean being a soldier, all right, or work or being in the military. Federal service means you actually do something for the people. You could be a postman, you could be a person who works in the DMV. It's for about 4 years, right? You sacrifice 4 years of your life working federal service, and then you get a full right to vote, and you have the right to hold office. Then there is non-voting and non-position holding citizenship for people who don't want to do that. So here we go. He's back, and I will run this by him again. Hey, welcome back.
I paid my Spectrum bill and everything, so I don't know, man.
That happens.
Turn your video back on. But so Craig is pitching his society where we have tiered citizenship. We have those that can do the military or some form of service.
Turn your camera on. There you go.
So it doesn't have to be military, but it will be first class and second class citizens. And as an anarchist leaning person, I would be against this unjust.
The only rights, the only things you would be denied is the right to vote and the right to hold office.
To decide what happens with my society. That's what you're denying.
You could, but the father was actually not the father, but you know, some other people were non-citizens, but they did very well in the society. And there's also a lot.
Sure, you can make all the money in the world. Yeah, I saw the movie. I didn't read the book. I saw the movie, which was made a meme out of this idea.
I'm sorry, the movie was totally jack shit. As much as I love
it was a good movie because it took the exact opposite take and it poked fun at these ideas.
I just general rule, you're not allowed to propose government systems from science fiction novels. Done.
No, I'm sorry, I can't get down with that because I got my ayahuasca meme.
2 year.
I said from.
I mean, I made it up.
That's
true. Yeah.
2-year mandatory federal service. Doesn't have to be military, but 2-year federal service.
Why? What is that
to prove
that so it shows a willingness to give to the society, to sacrifice for the society. I understand the underpinning idea. I get it.
Yes, but the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights.
Right, but you're not taking away the right to do better. You're not taking
away the right to vote.
To vote.
So you earn that. So basically, you have to earn that.
I thought it was inalienable. Wait, what kind of American
are
you?
All inalienable. But listen, the Constitution changed. They went through a world war. Veterans got together.
Yes, but that has never changed. They haven't decided that some rights you don't get because
I still think, hey, that's my terrible idea. If you guys don't want to roll with it, you don't have to roll with it. But let's take a look at some governments that do require mandatory
in your
military
defense,
service.
that's only one of your terrible ideas.
South Korea, Israel, right? All the Nordic countries, right? I think.
Wait. But you're talking about requiring military service. You're not talking about requiring military service to vote. You can vote in Israel even if you've never served in the military.
No, to become a citizen, you have to serve 2 years. Do you not?
I think I can be a citizen right now.
Yeah, I could be a citizen. I've got right of return.
You served in Israel's Israel's military.
I've never done any such thing.
You should check it out. Then you should check out.
I'm 50 years old. If I do right to return, I don't think they're going to make me serve.
I don't know. Well, take a look at it. take a look at it. I know that you had to have 2 year. There's a 2 year mandatory military service. You have to retain your Israeli citizenship. I don't know. There may be you maybe have maybe.
Yeah, I
have
don't know
been-
exactly what the rules are, but yes,
You
they do.
might-
Serve. They do
you
serve.
might-
You're right.
You might have been grandfathered in to some extent. Like, let's just say that you were a family that was fleeing persecution and whatnot.
No, we're just Jewish. That's all it takes. Like it has nothing to do with persecution or fleeing or refugee status. Like any Jew has right of return to Israel. I have right of return to Germany.
Oh, does Germany do right of return too?
Yes, for Jews or for probably anybody that was forced to flee.
Oh, I
during
didn't know
World War
that.
II.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting thing.
So-
But that's my terrible idea. All
Yeah,
right?
you're right. Well, like I said, in your defense, it's only one of your terrible ideas. You have
Many
others.
of my terrible ideas.
Yeah, but Craig, the problem with that is you cannot place restrictions on something like the right to vote or citizenship and think that they're never going to pile more restrictions on top of that. It's like,
So let's-
you served 2 years, but you served in the wrong. It's
So let's take this step back. So like all the
not to steel man Craig, but is that not a slippery slope?
it is a slippery slope.
fallacy.
Think about all the undocumented immigrants in the country right now. They still pay taxes, right? They still add to the prosperity of the nation growing as a whole, but yet they're not allowed to have Social Security. They're not allowed to have Medicare, Medicaid, right? They're not allowed to have any of these social services because they're not a citizen, but they still donate their time.
I think a lot. I mean, in a place like New York, they get plenty of stuff.
Well, it's basically through volunteer groups mostly that they'll get their aid.
how does this connect to your terrible idea?
Again, you have partial citizen, not partial citizen. You have a tier 2 citizenship where you have all the rights of everything else, except you don't get to vote. You don't get to hold office. Whereas
No,
you
it's a
sacrifice
ridiculous
4
thing.
years.
It feels to me similar to what we had before, which was the landowning people could own. It's just a bar to
No,
democracy.
the landowning
I see no good reason. I'm sorry. Like this is a principle of mine. Like I don't think there can be any good reason to
landowning people either
to
inherited
consolidate the democracy.
They
Like I think
never
you've got to
inherited-
diffuse the democracy.
Yeah. Why would you start bifurcating our democracy? What does that give you?
It's not
Serving-
bifurcating
listen,
my democracy.
Listen, I don't know about you, but I have known a couple people who served in the Israeli armed forces. The
Mhm.
last one I knew was one of the she was high all the fucking time.
Yeah, my
So-
uncle lived on a kibbutz in Israel. He went
So-
there like in the early 70s. He was
So
Same boat.
serving in the Israeli armed forces didn't infuse her with any sort of great love or respect for Israel. Matter of fact, she came here
Mhm.
as soon as she could. So there's no connection between serving in the armed forces and having some greater appreciation
Did
of your
she
country.
retain her Israeli citizenship?
I don't know. She was here and she wasn't going back, man.
Why? That's fine. I mean, like
was raped.
after your 2 year service is over, you still get Israeli citizenship. You can go wherever.
I mean,
hell
like,
you
all right.
want.
So, like, I know you said there are other ways of serving, but like, I think maybe a couple years ago, I nudged you away from like just strictly military serving in this pitch,
Mhm.
because my argument was like, well, right now I don't approve of the way my government or Israel's government, if we're going to talk about them too, like uses their military. So, in order to decide how to manipulate or have any control of the society, I have to then to serve the devil first. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to have to do that.
Is it really the devil? I mean,
Does America do good things around the world?
it does some good things around the world. doesn't
All
do
right,
some
let's
great
look
things
at the
around
on
world.
average. On average, you know, I
We're
mean, when you would like, I mean, again, our military control has created what I forget the term for it.
We
but
are the world's
unequal
police force.
trade. You know, like there's a reason that we live as well as we do, and it's because we step on much of the rest of the world, us and all the other white
Well,
countries.
you know what? China and Russia are going to basically take over our position as world's policemen. Let's see
They
how
do
much
the same
love-
thing.
over
to a certain
shit.
extent.
Let's see how much they love. Really? So
Russia is a poor petrochemical autocracy.
and
They're not
China
taking over shit.
China has been basically encroaching in on Africa. They have definitely encroached in on the South China Sea, right? They promised the Philippines president Duterte all.
All right, hold
these
on. But what's the
things.
point? What's your
Yeah.
point?
What's my point?
Yeah.
Again, going back to my point, serving your country 4 years shows that you are a responsible individual who
No,
understands
does it? It
It
shows that
does.
you ticked off the box so you could vote.
And do you know the process that you have to go through to earn the citizenship? I mean, it's grueling, right? It's literally
I mean,
grueling.
like, so we'll all right, hold on. Let's try to think of a comparison. So are the kids whose parents made them, do all the stupid groups in high school so that they could put it on their college application, are they going to be better students and leave college with more? Like, are they better somehow because of those things? Or is the student that's really smart and writes the good essay and gets the good test scores, you know what I mean, like, and gets the good grades, is that like, is the kid that has the extracurriculars, are they better? Maybe, actually.
I mean, I don't
might have
know.
killed
I
my
don't
argument.
I don't know. I was more like the second.
No, I'm just trying to find a parallel.
I don't. So the thing is, like, a parallel would be with somebody who joined the army for 4 years, served in Iraq for 2 tours, come back and be a better politician, be a better person, be a better
No.
citizen.
No.
Like, let's put it this way. Like, yeah, there's,
No.
you can hold on, you can wait. There's Dan Crenshaw from Texas. Okay, that guy was a Navy SEAL,
Uh-huh.
right? And he's basically, I thought he would be a decent Republican. No, he turns out to be, he's actually a piece of shit Republican, right? And no, he's no bueno.
Now, if I happen to be
Okay.
on a ship
But
and
hold on.
and Crenshaw was the chef there and terrorists took it over, I'd be happy to have him there to help me get out of that scenario.
Well,
But would he be a better politician? I don't know.
no Steven Seagal comparison here. Fuck that.
No,
And
he's,
then
he's-
hold on.
No, serving in the military does not make you a better person.
And you have Tammy Duckworth. On the other hand, Iraq vet, lost both her legs during a helicopter crash and got those people out. So, both people say they love the Constitution. Both people will try and uphold what's best for America, right? But one, Dan Crenshaw, is influenced by GOP politics and is basically, he's very partisan about his beliefs. And Tammy Duckworth, is basically, again, another military veteran, but she looks out for everybody. So it's an ideal.
Okay, but my argument might be that we are then baking in a little bit of a bias towards the military or towards militant action.
And it doesn't have to be military. It could be federal service. Again,
Sure.
you could work in a
Last
post
I
office.
checked, Bernie Sanders didn't serve in anything.
Yeah.
No,
And
he
you
Well,
didn't.
you were Bernie,
marry
bro.
him, Craig.
What happened?
I would have married, but you know what? It would have been better if it would have been better if he had done so, right?
Why?
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 Shows that it shows that you.
It shows
put-
you that, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it shows that
you
to me.
served your country. That you're serving your country. By the way, it's 2 minute.
I mean, look.
warning.
All right. Well, I think we
know
can cut it
what?
soon
My
anyway.
friend Harry was an Air Force weathercaster back in the 50s, weather forecaster back in the 50s. Well, he's dead now, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But you know what he said? The first thing, what he learned very quickly about the military after he would join the Air Force?
Hmm.
The idiots are in charge. Do what the idiots tell you to. I think you have some fantasy of what the military is. Military is just the biggest corporation in the US. And
Yeah, I mean,
oftentimes-
I think that there are
idiots are
things
in
you can
charge.
gain from it, like you can learn
minute,
discipline and all
Yes,
these
absolutely.
things. But I don't necessarily know that they generate better citizens.
You can learn those things in the military, but that's dependent upon the person going in. You can
Yeah.
also learn those things from the Boy Scouts, from having a job, from a church, whatever. Like the military is just one place. But Craig, you have this fantasy about what the military is, and I really
Not a
think you should
fantasy.
go enlist.
I should.
I guess we unfortunately might need to continue this one
Yes,
another
we will
time.
have to. We'll have to continue this next week. We will definitely continue this conversation. I want to thank everybody for listening to our podcast, and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you
Peace.
for-
Have a good night.
Thank you to our listener.
Yep.